The sterile gray walls of the interrogation room seemed to amplify the absurdity of my situation. 10 minutes ago, I was prepping for a crucial system optimization meeting. Now I was being treated like a hardened criminal for the grievous offense of existing in my own driveway. Officer Karen Whitlock, her blonde bob a picture of smarmy self-satisfaction, had practically shoved me into the back of her patrol car. Her accusations of suspicious activity and a fabricated tip echoing in my ears. The air in the precinct was thick with a different kind of tension, a low hum of inefficiency, and the ever-present scent of cheap coffee. Desk sergeants shuffled papers with practiced indifference, as if arresting law-abiding citizens for their automotive placement was just another Tuesday. I sat on a hard plastic chair, the cold seeping through my suit trousers, trying to process the sheer audacity of it all. My mind, usually a meticulously organized network of data and logical processes, felt like a corrupted hard drive struggling to make sense of this illogical intrusion. I replayed the encounter in my head, her aggressive stance, her dismissive tone when I calmly presented facts, her almost gleeful reach for her handcuffs. It wasn't about a parking violation. It was about something far more insidious, something rooted in a deeply ingrained prejudice that saw me, Yolland Pierce, a homeowner and a respected professional, as an anomaly, an outsider to be questioned, and, if possible, punished. The lack of a badge flash, the absence of a polite introduction, the immediate escalation to force it all pointed to an individual who saw herself as judge, jury, and executioner, operating outside the bounds of due process. The accusation of not being registered to live here was particularly galling. Did she think I'd materialized on the property overnight? And my name was on the deed. My face was plastered on a City Tech newsletter that very month, and my meticulously maintained lawn was a testament to my 6 years of residency. The incongruity was so stark, so blatant, it was almost cartoonish. If it weren't for the very real reality of my fingerprint dust and mugshot, the officer who booked me, a burly man with a perpetually bored expression, barely looked up from his computer screen as he read the charges: obstruction and vehicle violation. The words felt ludicrous, a nonsensical bureaucratic attempt to legitimize Whitlock's baseless aggression. I was waiting for my lawyer, hopeful that reason and legal precedent would prevail. But a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just about a parking ticket. It felt like a deliberate act of intimidation, a stark reminder of how quickly societal biases could manifest into tangible, oppressive actions. The silence of the room was broken only by the distant wail of sirens, a constant reminder of the unpredictable nature of the world outside these walls, and the unsettling reality that sometimes the very people sworn to protect and serve could become the perpetrators of injustice. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against my patience. Just as the gnawing frustration began to curdle into something closer to despair, the door to the interrogation room creaked open. It wasn't another uniformed officer, nor the bored desk sergeant returning with some menial piece of paperwork. Instead, standing in the doorway, radiating an aura of sharp intellect and no-nonsense authority, was my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Beside him, a stark contrast to the drab precinct, stood a man in a crisp suit, carrying a manila folder with an air of officialdom. Mr. Harrison, a firm handshake and a reassuring nod, didn't waste any time. "Yolone, I've got everything we need here," he stated, his voice a low rumble that cut through the room's oppressive quiet. He held up the folder, which contained, as he'd promised, irrefutable evidence of my ownership and residency. The deed, stark and official, was the first piece. But it was the second item, a crisp letter embossed with the city's seal and bearing. The signature of the mayor himself that truly shifted the atmosphere. Mr. Harrison laid it on the table between us. "This," he said, tapping the letter, "is regarding your appointment to the city's Smart Infrastructure Advisory Board, appointed by none other than Mayor Thompson." My breath hitched. I'd forgotten about that. The mayor's personal invitation to join a board focused on the city's technological future had been a significant honor.
Oh.
A recognition of my expertise and commitment to civic engagement.
Oh.
Karen Whitlock, in her self-appointed crusade, had clearly been operating. In a vacuum of information, oblivious to my actual standing within the community, the man beside Mr. Harrison, introduced as an aide from the mayor's office, nodded grimly. "The mayor is displeased, Mr. Pierce," he stated, his tone carefully neutral, but his eyes betraying a hint of anger. "He considers this a grave misuse of law enforcement resources and an insult to the citizens he serves." The implications of this were immediate and palpable. The junior officer who had escorted Mr. Harrison to my room suddenly seemed to shrink, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous fidgeting. The case, which had felt so insurmountable moments before, suddenly had an entirely new trajectory. It wasn't just an individual's overreach, it was now an issue of civic integrity, a matter that had escalated straight to the highest levels of city government. The foundation of Karen Whitlock's fabricated case began to crumble under the weight of official endorsement and demonstrable fact. The appearance of my lawyer and the mayor's aide acted like a seismic shockwave through the precinct. The news of my appointment to the advisory board, coupled with the mayor's direct involvement, caused a palpable shift in the demeanor of everyone I encountered. Suddenly, the previous nonchalance evaporated, replaced by a flurry of activity and hushed conversations. A senior officer, a captain with a stern but now distinctly apologetic countenance, entered the interrogation room. He didn't offer platitudes or excuses. Instead, he spoke directly to Mr. Harrison and the mayor's aide, his voice laced with a clear discomfort. "Mr. Pierce," the captain began, his gaze meeting mine, "I understand there's been a considerable misunderstanding. Officer Whitlock was not assigned to your sector, nor was there any verified tip regarding your property. Her actions appear to be frankly unauthorized and based on personal bias." Paused, clearly searching for the right words, which in itself spoke volumes. "We have initiated an immediate review of her conduct and the circumstances surrounding this unfortunate incident. Furthermore, Internal Affairs has been notified and is open to formal investigation." The words personal bias hung in the air, a stark acknowledgement of the racial undertones that had fueled my arrest. It was no longer a speculative gut feeling. It was being acknowledged, albeit cautiously, by the department's leadership. The captain then explained that Whitlock had self-assigned to my neighborhood, citing a concerned resident tip that upon immediate investigation proved to be entirely fabricated. This confirmed my suspicions. Karen Whitlock had, indeed, made it all up. She had manufactured a narrative to justify her actions, to satisfy her own prejudiced impulses, without any basis in reality or departmental procedure. The aide from the mayor's office then interjected, his voice cutting through the captain's careful phrasing. "The mayor expects a full and transparent report on this matter, Captain. Any evidence of falsified reports, abuse of power, or procedural violations will be dealt with decisively." The implication was clear. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug. The department was already scrambling to contain the fallout, to mitigate the damage to their reputation, and to appease the palpable anger emanating from the mayor's office. My case had become more than just a personal grievance. It was a public demonstration of a systemic issue, a crack in the veneer of law enforcement impartiality. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the suspicious individual in Whitlock's twisted narrative. I was a respected citizen, backed by the highest levels of city government, and the foundation of her baseless accusations was rapidly eroding. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere within the precinct continued to thicken with anticipation. The initial conciliatory gestures from the captain and the mayor's aide felt like a prelude, a quiet before the storm.
Ow!
And then the storm arrived. The precinct doors swung open, and Mayor Thompson himself strode in, his usual affable demeanor replaced by a thunderous scowl. He wasn't accompanied by aides or security. He was alone, a clear indication of his singular fury. He bypassed the front desk entirely, heading straight for the administrative offices. And within minutes, I was being escorted, not back to an interrogation room, but into a conference room, where the captain, my lawyer, and the mayor's aide were already present. The mayor didn't waste a second on pleasantries. He looked directly at me, his eyes sharp and unwavering. "Mr. Pierce," he began, his voice resonating with a controlled rage, "I have just been briefed on the entirety of this grotesque situation. The security footage from your property, the fabricated 911 call logs, the unsubstantiated tip that Officer Whitlock apparently conjured out of thin air, and your impeccable record, it's all here." He gestured to a stack of papers on the table, a compilation of the evidence that had been gathering since my arrest. "This entire operation," he continued, his voice rising slightly, "was a flagrant abuse of power, a clear violation of your civil rights, and frankly, a betrayal of the public trust." The precinct's higher-ups, including the captain, stood by, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and dawning realization of the magnitude of the mess Whitlock had created. They attempted to offer a quiet settlement, suggesting a swift resolution that would keep the embarrassing details out of the public eye. My lawyer, ever the astute advocate, looked to me for my decision. I met the mayor's gaze. "A settlement?" asked, my voice steady, despite the tremor of emotion within me. "For what?" "Act. For being arrested in my own driveway because of her prejudice." I shook my head. "No, that's not enough. This needs to be public. This needs to be addressed. People need to know what happened." The mayor nodded, a grim understanding passing between us. "I concur, Mr. Pierce," he stated, his voice firm. "This level of misconduct cannot be allowed to fester in the shadows." He then turned to the captain. "Expect a full disciplinary action against Officer Whitlock. And I want a public statement from the department acknowledging the wrongful arrest and the investigation into her conduct. Transparency is paramount in this instance." The quiet settlement was unequivocally rejected. Now, the mayor's commitment to addressing the issue openly was a powerful endorsement, transforming my personal outrage into a matter of public interest and accountability. The wheels of justice, however slow and often bureaucratic, had begun to turn with a newfound urgency. Propelled by the mayor's righteous indignation, the dam burst the very next morning. News outlets tipped off by sources close to the mayor's office and likely my own legal team ran the story with unflinching headlines. Tech exec arrested in own driveway by off-duty cop. Civil rights probe launched. The narrative, previously confined to the sterile walls of the precinct, exploded onto the public stage. My name, Yalin Pierce, systems engineer, homeowner, and victim of what was clearly racial profiling, was suddenly everywhere. The story resonated deeply, tapping into a simmering frustration with perceived injustices within law enforcement. Social media became a wildfire of opinion and solidarity. Protests began forming outside the police station, banners held high, voices chanting for accountability. The hashtag #ParkWhileBlack, initially coined by a few who saw the immediate parallels to other incidents of racial profiling, gained viral traction, exploding across platforms. My Ring doorbell footage, capturing the raw confrontation with Officer Karen Whitlock, was leaked and quickly garnered millions of views. The visual evidence of her aggressive posture, her unfounded accusations, and the sheer absurdity of arresting a well-dressed homeowner for parking in his own driveway became the damning proof that underscored the public outcry. The footage was undeniable, a stark and unsettling testament to the incident. Officer Whitlock, who had evidently relished her moment of perceived authority, found herself on the receiving end of a different kind of public scrutiny. She was immediately suspended, but the backlash continued to mount. The department, initially attempting damage control, found itself overwhelmed by the sheer volume of public anger and media attention. The investigation into her conduct, fueled by the mayor's insistence on transparency and the overwhelming evidence, moved with unprecedented speed. It wasn't long before the department's internal review, coupled with the findings of internal affairs, led to the inevitable conclusion. Officer Karen Whitlock was not just disciplined, she was fired. The charges against her went beyond the wrongful arrest and obstruction of my rights. They included falsifying official reports, gross abuse of power, and a blatant disregard for established civil procedure. The consequences were severe and far-reaching. Career in law enforcement was over. And in a final crushing blow, her pension, the financial security she had presumably worked towards for years, was revoked. The story of Yolan Pierce, arrested for parking in his own driveway, became a powerful, albeit painful, symbol of the ongoing struggle for justice and equality, a stark reminder that even in the most mundane of spaces, the fight against prejudice could erupt with devastating force. The reckoning for Karen Whitlock was complete, a testament to the undeniable power of truth, public outcry, and the unwavering pursuit of accountability.